for people to use the relevant media platforms, those who are able to join from home. But up to thus far, we have planned for close to 3,000 people who will be in the stadium. In terms of the dignitaries, I can confirm that, for example, I know the Deputy Prime Minister of Eswatini will be among the mourners.
Nigerians are facing growing hurdles in obtaining visas in some countries. Visa overstay, poor documentation, and national security issues are just some of the top concerns. The United States of America, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United Arab Emirates are just some of the countries that have introduced stricter visa restrictions. The restrictions are part of their immigration crackdown.
The dexterity with which Nigeria is able to handle it will determine how it escalates or not. But the general belief is that given the U.S. interest in Nigeria, given Nigerians who are in diaspora in America, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes engagement that is happening, and a lot more will happen. And given also that this isn't the first time this has come about, it is generally believed that the situation is going to be ameliorated, is going to abate. And Nigeria says it is sharing the data it needs to share with the U.S., and it is open to do more if that is required.
Lastly, France's public health authorities say more than 100 people have died from drowning between the 1st of June and the 2nd of July this year. This is an increase of 58% over the same period last year. The authorities have attributed the number of deaths to unusually warm weather at the end of June. Scientists say 300 people died of heat-related causes across 12 European cities during the extreme weather. Recapping on your top stories, Kenya has sworn in a group of top electoral officials following their approval by President William Ruto. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, so Arsenal have had a world record bid in the excess of $1.3 million accepted by Women's Super League rivals Liverpool for forward Olivia Smith. And Real Madrid's FIFA Club World Cup 2025 campaign may have ended in the semi-finals, but the club still secured $93 million in prize money. Details of these and other stories coming up at 4:30.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
It is exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. This is Africa in Business, bringing you the latest business news from around the African continent. On our radar this afternoon, we'll take a look at corruption in South Africa. 18 years after South Africa ratified an international anti-bribery convention, a new report shows that not a single person or a single company has been prosecuted for foreign bribery. We'll also be looking at the second annual Africa Unlocked conference, which has been taking place in Cape Town, where business leaders, investors, policymakers and entrepreneurs have gathered to discuss, amongst others, the issues of trade wars and the advancement of Africa's economic sovereignty. It is 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Do make sure that you continue engaging with us on our various social media platforms. On X, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, we are at Channel Africa.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
We begin here this afternoon with a look at the South African Broadcasting Corporation. The funding allocation for the next 3 years remains below what is needed for the SABC. The public broadcaster has made a plea to Parliament and the executive for increased funding in line with the current digital advancements so as to effectively execute its public mandate. However, the funding announced by the Communications and Digital Technologies Minister Solly Malatsi on Friday falls short of this demand, as Dimakazo Leshuru reports.
Earlier this year, the SABC made its plea in Parliament for increased funding, pointing to an archaic funding model that doesn't reflect the current happenings in broadcasting that require a digital overhaul and competition with broadcasters who are not bound by the public mandate legislation for advertisement revenue. Added to this is the expectation for the public broadcaster to raise revenue collection from TV licenses, but compliance is very low. This is the SABC's Chief Executive Nomsa Chaberi making the case for Parliament to intervene.
The current funding of the SABC is unsustainable. It would be remiss of me not to say that. We've spoken about the competitiveness in this industry, whereby there's new competitors that have entered our market, and we are genuinely unable to compete at the speed of change with our current funding, because it requires some serious investments for us to be able to actually be present and play a role when it comes to the new audiences that we are seeing. Our funding model is such that we have to be commercially competitive. So we currently are getting 4% in the form of a grant via the DCTT. What the SABC is asking for, and really our rallying call, is not a grant, is not a bailout. We genuinely are not in the market for a bailout. But what we are asking is that the SABC must be funded in order to deliver the public mandate. This is not unique to the SABC. Globally, public broadcasters around the world are funded.
Fast forward to Friday when the Communications and Digital Technologies Minister, Solly Malatsi, presented his budget in Parliament. He praised the SABC for achieving an unqualified audit opinion for the first time in 14 years in the last financial year. He says new ideas are needed on funding the SABC. Malatsi has published a request for proposals on how to fund the SABC. Meanwhile, his department has received a budget allocation of $434 million over the medium-term expenditure framework period.
Of this amount, 5.4 billion, which amounts to 69.1%, is allocated to transfers to our entities and project-specific funding. The public broadcaster will receive 704 million over the MTF period. This includes 43 million for program production, 464 million to support the core public broadcasting mandate, and 197 for Channel Africa, which amplifies South Africa's voice across the continent. Furthermore, the department has published the request for proposals to develop a more sustainable funding model that is much needed for the public broadcaster.
Economic Freedom Fighters member of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies in Parliament, Sinao Tambo, says that the allocation to the department is laughable and reflects government's lack of appreciation of the role of the digital technology in modernization and job creation.
The chronic underinvestment in modernizing the SABC is disgraceful. The deteriorating Auckland Park building symbolizes the broader crisis. Low staff morale due to poor pay, stagnating creativity from a lack of strategic project funding, and the absence of innovation once seen, which created productions such as Yizo Yizo, Gazlam, Zone 14, Home Affairs, and many other compelling productions. The SABC lacks a current funding model, and this is deeply troubling.
Chairperson of the committee, Kusela Sangoni, says there have been many setbacks amongst the spots of progress.
Today, as we speak, key legislation such as the SABC bill and the amendment of the Electronic Communications Act have stalled. And if this strategic plan that we are debating today as part of the budget is anything to go by, such legislation is at risk of being abandoned altogether. The gains of transformation are being reversed, and our portfolio of state-owned enterprises are facing an assault on their mandates from the very department that is meant to protect them.
Sangoni has questioned delaying crucial legislative and other reforms required to leapfrog South Africa's digital economy.
We must ponder whether through this budget we are once again funding a series of missed opportunities and unfulfilled promises. We must critically engage on whether this department can truly deliver without a cohesive vision and strategic alignment. Or are we enabling the department to remain an albatross around the neck of innovation and progress? So we're calling on the minister to set out a clear vision for the industry and mobilize all stakeholders to realize it. We're saying to the minister, pick a side, and I hope it is the right side. Run with it so that we know where you stand on important matters, such as economic transformation in favor of the black majority.
Tambo lamented the department's plans to align the Electronic Communications Act and the ICT sector codes to allow foreign companies to bypass the 30% local ownership regulation.
This is a proposal we've objected to because the so-called alignment would require an amendment to legislation, and this cannot be achieved through a ministerial policy directive. In our view, this is all in service of allowing Starlink to operate in South Africa, and we must state that we will never allow Starlink, which was weaponized misinformation and capture of the White House, to erode US and South Africa's diplomatic relations in order to ease business access in South Africa. We view that as economic and diplomatic terrorism.
For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, 18 years after South Africa ratified an international anti-bribery convention, a new report has found that not a single person or a single company has been prosecuted for foreign bribery. Now, South Africa signed the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's key anti-foreign bribery convention in June of 2007. And in effect, what this did, it gave the country access to the club of developed countries' technical and knowledge resources. For more on this, let's talk now to senior content and website editor at Corruption Watch, Janine Erasmus. A very good afternoon to you, Janine. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to the listeners.
So your thoughts and your reflections then, considering that after 18 years, not a single individual, not a single company has been prosecuted for foreign bribery. And I say this because one of the ways that South Africa is known, especially when it comes to business, is corruption. We know it's rife. We've had commissions, we've had court cases. But under this particular convention, not a single person, not a single company. Why?
That is a very good question. Even the OECD itself has not been able to get to the bottom of this, to unearth the actual reasons for it. We know that we've tried. We've got these cases going. We've got some cases that have been closed without charges. We've got one case that had to be withdrawn because the defendant passed away. But in this particular area for foreign bribery convictions, as you say, there is definitely a lack of progress and a lack of results. It's quite likely also to have to be influenced by the lack of capacity in our law enforcement agencies. We know that state capture had a very severe weakening effect on prosecuting agencies, on the police. The state capture was designed to weaken those institutions so that accountability would not be asked for. So and we have struggled to bounce back from that. We are still trying to capacitate our agencies, but it's coming very slowly.
As Corruption Watch, what are the most common types of corruption cases that have been reported to you, and which sectors seem to be the most affected?
We find mostly that the predominant types of corruption that come to us, corruption complaints that come to us, have got to do with maladministration. We also find that there are quite a lot of fraud complaints. There are employment irregularities such as nepotism or, employing somebody irregularly. Bribery and extortion also accounts for a significant percentage of the reports that we get, around about 15%, and also procurement irregularities, pardon.
You mentioned a lack of capacity as one of the drawbacks in actually effecting change. But how effective are the current government anti-corruption measures, and what are some of the gaps that still exist in holding public officials accountable?
We have very good legislation, Thami, but the enforcement thereof is weak. We've seen this. It's not just in criminal justice. We've seen it across the government spectrum. We've got good laws, we've got good policies, but to implement them and to enforce them has always been a very weak point in our government's performance. We've got the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, which will only be effective if properly implemented and enforced. The failure to secure the foreign bribery convictions is, as you say, is a consequence of our weak law enforcement capacity, and this has also had the effect that we have not had any state capture convictions domestically of high profile individuals. The consequence management is very, very weak. People get away with corruption day in and day out. There are no consequences for personal acts of corruption. So this is the implication that corruption is, in a way, it's condoned, because we don't see people having to account for their actions, and that, I think, is a very, very big gap. If people were prosecuted and convicted, it would act as a deterrent. But as it is, people know that they've got impunity and they can get away with it.
And with that said, Janine, what role can ordinary citizens and civil society play in fighting corruption? Yes, granted you've outlined all the impediments, but what can the ordinary man in the street do?
Thami, it's very easy for an ordinary person to think, I'm just one person. What can I do? How can I possibly make a difference? But you can. There are things that you can do. The wave starts from the bottom up. So people must be active and engaged. Understand how your municipality works. Understand what your rights are, what the basic services are that you are entitled to. And if you don't get them, know how to hold your municipalities accountable. Know where to report to, and know the people that you need to report to. Take part in elections. Make sure that we get the government that we deserve. Make your vote count. Make your voice heard. Report corruption. If you know somebody who's blown the whistle, give them support, because whistleblowers have quite a tough life. Once they've come forward with their allegations, they need support, and that means their communities can support them. We need to support freedom of the press. We need to encourage free and independent media. People can also engage in anti-corruption initiatives. They can join civil society organizations, or they can support the work of those civil society organizations that work on anti-corruption initiatives and, community mobilization. They can organize and even participate in protests and campaigns.
And there certainly are a lot of avenues, as you're pointing out, Janine. And I think also being a participant gives you hope as well, in the sense that you're not just a bystander, but you're actually part of trying to find a solution. We thank you so much for your insight this afternoon. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Janine Erasmus. She is the Senior Content and Website Editor at Corruption Watch. She takes us to 22 minutes after 4 p.m.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
SABC Sport brings you Chasing the Sun, a powerful 5-part documentary series about the Springboks, telling a rousing tale of their path to redemption and their ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting the 13th of July at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Tune in every Sunday for the highs, the heartache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. And maybe the best news is that no subscription is needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun, this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is 23 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, the second annual Africa Unlocked conference that took place at the Norval Foundation in Cape Town, South Africa, has now wrapped up. It was hosted by Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking. The event convened Africa's most influential business leaders, investors, policymakers and entrepreneurs. Topics of discussion included trade wars and the advancement of Africa's economic sovereignty, amongst others. To get more on this, we're joined by Mleli Chondoma, Operations Director at Interproms. And to find out more, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much, Thami. Thank you very much for having me.
So could you tell us why it was important that you attended this conference? Why was it in your diary?
Okay, great. So I'll give you some context. Our business operates out of Lesotho, which is this country which is completely landlocked by South Africa. So any conversations that we have about how to unlock potential in our markets or the problems that we're facing are always very, talked about in a silo. It's a relationship between Lesotho and South Africa, SACU countries. So when I saw this, it was something that really appealed to me, to have access to other African business people, other African thought leaders in the business industry, and to see, is there any commonality between what's happening to us in this small siloed environment, and are there other learnings that we can get from other parts of the continent? And it's not often that you have an opportunity to be in a room like that, where you're not only having thought leaders, you're having business leaders, and you're having, your banking partner. In this case, for us, it's Standard Bank Business and Commercial Banking, who really helps us to drive our business and to unlock potential. So it was too good to pass up, really. As I said, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I didn't manage to go to their first inaugural year, but I feel like this is something that we can all benefit from, and talking to each other and getting out of our comfort zones to really find out what are the solutions and what is really happening in the continent.
And talking about that, what are some of the key challenges that the building material supply business specifically is faced with in the current economic climate within the continent? And perhaps if you could highlight what some of the strategies that have been discussed and the strategies that are needed in order to address these.
Well, I would say, I'm going to oversimplify it because I don't think we have all the time in the world. But I think right now it's uncertainty, right? What drives, the building industry is usually an indicator of what's happening in the economy. What we see a slowdown in business, it's usually a slowdown in the industry 3 or 4 or 6 months down the line. And I think right now there's a lot of uncertainty, which is putting a kind of a stop on a lot of infrastructure development projects. Because if you don't know what's happening in the economy and there's uncertainty, these trade wars, tariffs, you don't want to do big spend on infrastructure. And I think a lot of governments are under pressure right now, especially in Africa, especially countries that had in their budgets perhaps money that was coming from foreign donors and aid, and not coming from the private sector, but coming from other governments. So we are seeing a slowdown in spend simply because of the uncertainty in the market. In my market, particularly Lesotho, which has also got an added challenge, we were one of the countries, as 2 million people, who were hit with a 50% trade tariff. So when we are trying to get investors to come in and invest, we have a manufacturing of textiles in our country. That's one of our big exports. You're just getting people be really unsure. So they're not spending that kind of money. So what do you do in that situation? It's nothing in my control. So in our business, we've really been trying to focus on being more solution orientated. Instead of just trying to sell the usual bricks, mortar, and cement, you're trying to do a value add and say, okay, in this challenging environment, how can we leverage data, information about our consumers in a smarter, more efficient way? Our consumers have changed. You have to preempt what you think that they need and really bring product to market that is solution orientated and not just, doing the same old. So you have to innovate and with products and stuff. So that's really what we've been trying to do, and you've got to do it quick. That's the challenge that we have at the moment. Really is the speed of us pivoting.
And looking at Lesotho specifically, what are the panic levels now? I mean, the 1st of August is literally just around the corner. I don't know if you've already recovered from the COVID pandemic, because that was a huge blow in and of itself. And now these 50% tariffs. So if you could, in your answer, just maybe try and answer both of those questions.
Like recovery and also kind of the temperature right now. Okay. Right. I think let's talk about the temperature right now. we don't really have a lot in terms of exports. A lot of our budget, was augmented by foreign donors, as I was saying. So we have a budget deficit, right? That's going to come from the stopping of aid. Of course, that's not the end of the world. You have alternatives, but then we also have the 50% tariff, which is really squeezing us because our textile industry was one of our biggest employers. And those factories have stopped production. So those people currently, as we speak, are not employed because we want to see if the trigger will be pulled, if you will, on August. So no one's going to be doing investment and bringing in new stock. So we are, I won't say panic mode. I will say that we are spooked a little bit, but you must be quietly optimistic. You have to believe that there will be some kind of opportunity that comes out of this. Maybe this is the time for us to be looking towards the rest of Africa. Why are we not exporting within the continent? So there's stuff like that you can look at. Now, with relation to the pandemic, the building industry is actually an exception, I think, to most of the rules, especially if you're in the retail side of it, like we are. In the sense that during COVID, people were sitting in their homes and seeing all the blemishes and all the things that they didn't see before. So during COVID, we were opened a bit earlier than other industries as essential services. So COVID itself wasn't actually as brutal, I think, to our industry as it was to some others. What you saw was, though, coming back from COVID, there was a lot of people who had lost their jobs, being made redundant. So now that spending kind of stopped. What we were seeing before this tariff issue came was that I think people started to understand that you can't believe that tomorrow is always guaranteed. So in Lesotho, we did see a boom in private homes being built. People were really deciding we're not going to rent anymore. We're going to finally use the site and build our homes. So we were really starting to see attraction and a build up in business. There's a dam project that's going on. The hospital was built during COVID. So those were two big infrastructure projects that happened during COVID. But now, obviously, we are seeing this kind of comma or hopefully not a full stop.
And hopefully not a full stop. And I'll use your words that you are adequately spooked. We shall wait for after August to see what the state of affairs is going to be as far as Lesotho is concerned. The country also having recently declared a state of disaster regarding the high unemployment rate. But we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Mlali Chondoma, we thank you so much for your time.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. She's Operations Director at Interproms. She takes us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time as we head over to the markets desk for the latest market indicators with Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. These are your financial indicators from the African continent. $1 is trading at 17 rand 75 in South Africa. Botswana 13.21. Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 75. Zambia 24 kwacha 30. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 478. Ethiopia 137 birr 442. Uganda 3,000 shilling 563. Tanzania 2,000 shilling 622. $1 in Nigeria is at 1,000 naira 527. Egypt, the dollar is 49 Egyptian pound 51. Tunisia 2 dinar 89. Algeria 129 dinar 007. Morocco, the dollar will cost you 8 dirham 95. Angola, the dollar is 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is at 2,866 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,357, platinum at $1,370 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $69.62 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And for the business of sport from the sporting desk, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. Let's start with the story. So Stephen Mokoka, South African long-distance runner, sets his sights on breaking the Masters 10-kilometer world record at the Absa Run Your City in Durban in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal this coming Sunday. So the highly anticipated event has sold out with over 10,000 participants taking place. The race organisers also offering $5,500 bonus should Mokoka surpass the current record of 27 minutes and 48 seconds that was set by Kenya's Bernard Legat in Manchester back in 2015. So Mokoka shared that he had hoped to travel with his family to KwaZulu-Natal for the special occasion, but financial constraints have made that virtually impossible.
No, I mean, I'm a South African runner. You know, we don't make that much amount of money to travel with our families. I mean, I've been running for so many years that there are a lot of things even now I can't afford. That's the unluck of a South African athlete. But I'll just travel by myself. Fortunately, my wife also have a little thing that she's doing on the side. So sometimes when she's invited, at least I've got a boost that she's there. But unfortunately, to be a South African runner, we just run. There is nothing that will say we are making enough to be able to travel with family. We are making enough to put on savings.
Meanwhile, the 40-year-old who also mentors a group of young athletes at the Tshwane University of Technology in the country's capital city, Pretoria, hopes the next generation of runners won't face the same struggles as well as setback currently endured by those in the sport.
You know, I always say to people, the work we do is very tough. It's not easy, but because we love it and we enjoy it, let's embrace it and hope that the work we put and the hard work we put, if we marry that with luck, maybe one day we can have medals like the other runners and then maybe we get better contracts.
Onto this now, Arsenal have had a world record bid in the excess of $1.3 million accepted by women's Super League rivals Liverpool for forward Olivia Smith. The current world record sits at $1.2 million that Chelsea paid to sign United States defender Naomi Girma from the Santiago Wave side in January of this year. The deal for the 20-year-old Canadian international Smith is subject to medical as well as personal terms being agreed upon. Smith joined Liverpool from Portuguese side Sporting Lisbon just last year and also scored 7 times in 20 Women's Soccer League appearances in her debut season. Smith also joined Liverpool for a club record fee of just over $270,000 in July of 2024 from the Portuguese side and also still has 2 years left on her contract. So Liverpool, who finished 7th in the Women's Super League last season, view the sale of Smith as a major opportunity to strengthen their squad by reinvesting the transfer fee. Now, they are currently without a manager since sacking Matt Bird in February of this year, with the former Manchester City boss Gareth Taylor the leading candidate to take over as the coach of the side. England midfielder Jordan Henderson is set to sign for Brentford United after his exit from Ajax earlier on this week. The 35-year-old will join the Bees on a 2-year deal after the Dutch club agreed to end his contract a year early. Henderson had considerable interest from top clubs in England as well as Europe, but Brentford United have won the race to sign the former Liverpool captain. The deal formalities are expected to be confirmed in the next coming days. The move to Brentford also will return Henderson to the Premier League after he left Liverpool back in 2023. And finally, the Lucky Molly Women's League in the Super V Racing has been officially launched at the Swartskop Raceway near Centurion in South Africa's Gauteng province, and it was launched earlier on this week, marking a new era of the sport in the country. At the same time, Lucky Molly SA Chief Executive Officer Militia Labuschagne talks about motorsport as a business.
What do we want motorsport to be in 10 years' time? Do we want again those banks of the race the different racing tracks filled with cars and fans and all the racing teams feeling like superstars again? I mean, we know the sort of van der Merwes and all the legends when it comes to racing. We look at the Drive to Survive with the Formula One. All of these things show us that people like people, and if that is the focus, to be able to grow a brand, and I now talk about motorsport as a brand, and really think about the vision involving people and making decisions where you think of how can you grow this, how.
Well, that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. Have a great sporting weekend. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:39 Central African time as we turn our focus to the Insurance Fraud Prevention Conference 2025, which just wrapped up today at the Birchwood Hotel in Johannesburg, South Africa. The two-day summit brought together fraud experts, insurance executives, law enforcement and regulators from across the African continent and beyond. And what was their mandate? To find solutions to one of the most persistent threats in the insurance industry, and that being fraud. At the event, Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange spoke to the organizers, Tatenda Zimano from Businet Advanced Training.
From staged accidents to fake claims and data manipulation, insurance fraud is costing the industry billions each year. Over the past 2 days, industry leaders and forensic investigators gathered to examine these challenges and, more importantly, to collaborate on practical solutions. Tatenda Zimano, conference producer from Businet Advanced Training, says the conversations this year went far beyond statistics and focused on real collaboration across sectors.
Key takeaways from the presentations that we had are just focusing on collaboration, the need for collaboration in fighting insurance fraud. Put together your AI and what is happening around the technological developments, but also not forgetting the human aspect. Behind the scenes, behind the laptop, behind the technology is the human being who's operating, who's assessing the claims and integrating that.
Delegates came from across Africa and as far afield as the United Kingdom. Zimano says their participation enriched the dialogue by highlighting shared challenges and potential shared solutions.
We had representatives from Mauritius, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Namibia, Angola, South Africa, Kenya, and the United Kingdom. The benefit from those cross-sector and countries coming together has been the interactions. So, different countries have different legislations, but then the problem is just the same. We've got fraudsters coming up with different schemes. So the conversations have been centered around how best do we tackle the fraud that is happening? How best do we proactively act as much as the legislation in different countries might apply?
For Zimano, a standout moment was when the discussions turned from theory to lived experience as delegates shared chilling real-world examples of how insurance fraud infiltrates not only business but society.
It was the glaring realities. Because I have been putting together this conference, most of it has been theoretical, where you're reading different news articles, you're reading the possibilities. But then with the engagements and with the delegates actually coming across and saying, you know what, this is what we've incurred in our organization. It's just the realities and the scary realities actually of what we're facing and what needs to be done.
As the summit concludes, organizers called on attendees to take the insights beyond the conference walls to build ongoing networks, share best practices and ensure the collaboration continues.
What I would want to see beyond the conference is a continuation of the conversations, forming possibly communities of practice or communities, discussion groups where they're saying, you know what, this is what I'm facing. This is the best practice, because we've had amazing speakers, amazing experts, your Association of Fraud Examiners, your international speakers. So I would hope and I would like to see the conversation going on, the changes, the multi-sector collaboration starting, so that it's just not talk, but we actually get something practical going.
As fraud becomes more sophisticated, so must the tools to fight it. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Mzansi, this is more than just a game. It's a celebration of history. 30 years ago, the Springboks united our nation with that iconic World Cup victory in rugby. And now the mighty Boks are back. Don't miss South Africa versus Italy in the 30th anniversary commemoration match this Saturday, the 12th of July at 4 p.m. Watch it live on SABC2, or you could stream it anywhere on SABC Plus app. Download the SABC Plus app today on iOS, Android, or your smart TV. Switch to stream. No subscription needed. SABC Sport, for the love of the game.
This Mandela Month, Channel Africa invites you to walk in the footsteps of a giant. From the prison yard of Robben Island to the halls of the United Nations, Nelson Mandela's legacy reminds us that service, compassion, and justice are the building blocks of real freedom.
En cette journée Mandela, que nos actions fassent écho à son héritage.
Alionyesha dunia ya kwamba sauti moja yaweza kuhamasisha mataifa.
Mandela ensinou-nos que a liberdade não é dada, mas sim conquistada através da coragem e sacrifício.
Join us as we reflect, remember, and reignite the spirit of Madiba across the continent. This is more than a day. It's a call to action. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:46 Central African time as we turn our sights now to Zimbabwe, where the country has received a timely health intervention of $600,000 worth of medical equipment, this coming from the United Arab Emirates. This shipment is aimed at boosting the country's health delivery system. The donation comes amid a public outcry over the deterioration of the health delivery, prompting the President, Emmerson Mnangagwa, to conduct secret visits to two major hospitals in Harare recently. Details in this report by John Kasim, our correspondent based in Harare, Zimbabwe.
At a time when Zimbabwe appears to be placing top priority on quality health delivery, a timely intervention came on Thursday from the United Arab Emirates. Some medical equipment worth $600,000, including ventilators, was donated to help revive the health delivery system. This comes a few weeks after the President Emmerson Mnangagwa decided to visit two major hospitals in Harare to see for himself the deplorable state of the situation. Mnangagwa's visit was prompted by a series of complaints, some by his own cabinet ministers, who bemoaned the deterioration of the country's health delivery system. At the time, even ordinary painkillers, bandages, and life-saving antiretroviral drugs were either in short supply or not available. This could have been caused by the US of America's decision to plug health financing globally. Zimbabwe has its own HIV finance mechanism that kept it floating, although not adequate. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates ambassador to Zimbabwe, Dr. Chasim Mohammed Al-Qazim, said his country made the donation owing to a good economic relationship with the country.
As UAE government has been assisting Zimbabwe in the field of health, education, food, and environment, we would like to thank the government of Zimbabwe for giving us this opportunities to hand over these donations, and under the framework of our good and strong relationship between United Arab Emirates and Zimbabwe. We hope the medical aid make positive difference in the life of the people in Harare, Victoria Falls, and other places.
Upon receipt of the equipment, the Deputy Minister of Health, Sulaiman Timio Squidini, pledged to put this donation to good use.
Today, donation comprised of 34 tons of essential medical supplies, including 74 ICU ventilators, which are critical for managing life-threatening respiratory conditions. This consignment is valued at 623,737 and includes hypodermic 23G needles worth 49,387 syringes and 2.3 ml with 2,584 syringes, 1 ml worth about 449,249 and ICU ventilators valued at 122,515. These are not just figures on paper. These are life-saving tools. They represent our ability to respond more effectively to emergencies, reducing mortality and provide quality care to the people of Zimbabwe, especially in our rural and underserved communities.
Although Zimbabwe could be faring much better than other African countries on the continent, diseases like cancer are now exposing the gaps, requiring the country to pull several strings. John Kasim in Harare, Zimbabwe for Channel Africa News.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It has gone exactly 10 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. And as we do every single Friday, we feature Victor Khumuswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back, as he rounds up the top business stories on the African continent. Victor is also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. A very good afternoon and happy Friday to you, Victor.
Happy Friday, Thami. We made it.
We made it. We are still making it. I tell you what, Egypt's banking sector is probably saying, we made it, looking at how their net foreign assets rose by about $1.2 billion.
Yeah, $2.4 billion. You know, if you rank the top 10 African countries according to their ability to attract foreign direct investment, Morocco in the North African region and Egypt are in the top 10. And that means any banking sector is going to be benefiting from that kind of inflow of capital, because when you invest in a country, it does not matter. You are going to have to open a bank account, and often the bank account will be commercial kind of banking, and that's why you see that's what's driving these net assets. It's not retail, because it's much more the foreign direct investment spilling over into the banking sector. But that's good, because in the end, that's how capital formation happens, that you are able to do that. It's quite a steep increase, but it's because of that foreign direct investment. Egypt is very well located because it connects North Africa to the rest of the African continent, what we call sub-Saharan Africa. But it also connects the continent to the Middle East. And Middle East is in the top 3 sources of foreign direct investment when we are looking at the African development. And that's why Egypt is always going to benefit from these kinds of inflows, especially with the reserves. And you need reserves because they tend to stabilize your own economy, make you less vulnerable or less susceptible to the vagaries of the financial markets, capital markets.
Let's turn our focus now to Kenya, where a partnership between Unilever and Equity Bank is aiming at supporting small and medium-sized enterprises, and quite an investment that these two have actually put into this.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is about $18 million. So it's not a lot of money if you look at it in that scheme of things, just considering how huge Unilever is. And Equity Bank is probably the largest bank if we count the number of bank accounts they have. They are up there in the top 3, top 4. But the reason this is a critical story is a partnership between one of the world's largest consumer product companies. I mean, Sunlight, Green Sunlight, whether you use Dove soap, whether you are talking Cerebos table salt, these are products that are affordable and just about everybody can buy them. And therefore, the partnership is going to provide working capital for SMMEs. What are the SMMEs doing? They are mainly in the retail sector, which means they become the extension of the supply chain or the reach of Unilever to the market. So it's what they call, doing well in business by doing good for society. Because Unilever is saying to Equity Bank, let's find a way of facilitating access to trade finance. Trade finance allows you as a small business to buy stock without having to use your own cash, because if you have customers, you want to always not run out of stock. So it's such a brilliant enterprise and supplier development project. It's a partnership between the leading companies. One, a bank that came out of the collective savings scheme, and another, a multinational that spans the whole world and dominates the consumer products market.
And talking
partnership.
And talking about domination, we see Dangote refinery building. I know you always love Dangote stories, but once again, he's making history, making strides, and building a massive fuel storage facility in Namibia.
What's not to love, Thami? The man has built a 650 barrels per day refinery. He's changed the game. He has taken the resource, the commodities market of Africa, and converted it downstream. So what he's doing, because we have always talked about this, the 650 barrels per day, 1,000 barrels per day refinery, which is the largest in Africa, is actually said to be, according to Bloomberg, larger than the combined capacity of Europe's 10 largest refineries. Just think about that. This is one refinery. And by the way, it's owned more than 90% by Dangote. So it's not even something that he has to negotiate. So he's building a capacity that can store millions of liters in Namibia, but the aim is to distribute to Botswana, to Zambia, and to parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So he knows that he's producing refined petroleum products in Nigeria, diesel and petrol, but he's going to build this so that he can export some of it and distribute to the rest of the Southern African region. It's just an amazing story, and that's why you are going to see me follow whatever thing Dangote does. Even if he just sneezes in my direction, I want to know
it
why.
It will be newsworthy, because there's certainly something there. I mean, it was important for Dangote to, look at markets outside of Nigeria, because there was a level of frustration that he was experiencing there. But our final story, I mean, this really was a big surprise for many. Ethiopia, overtaken by Uganda as far as being Africa's leading coffee exporter. Did you see that coming?
No, I didn't see it coming. In fact, I sent a few messages to my friends in Ethiopia and say, guys, you are the home of coffee. Tell me what in the world happened. How do you get overtaken by Uganda? Not to downplay Uganda. You know, Uganda is a major coffee producer, 43,000 tons of coffee produce, and that's a lot of bags. But they haven't responded, I must say. But if I know Uganda, it tends to prioritize the farmer. In fact, Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya have done very well in focusing on the farmer development, the development of farmers. And it probably is the work of the Starbucks Farmer Development Center. I'm not sure that they are in Uganda, but I know they were in Tanzania, they were in Rwanda, and they were in Kenya. So the supply of the coffee to Starbucks, because Starbucks is trying to develop the quality of the produce, they go into different countries where coffee is farmed.
And that would be a very interesting one to go deeper into, Victor. But thank you so much for today's updates. Some really interesting business stories and developments on the African continent. You have yourself a fabulous weekend ahead.
You too, Thami. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Victor Khumusono, author of Africa is Open for Business, and Africa bounces back with our business roundup for this week. Et bonjour to you, Joël.
Bonjour, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Alors, sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question du Mali. Le général Assimi Goïta s'octroie un mandat présidentiel illimité. On parlera également de la reprise jeudi à Doha, au Qatar, des négociations RDC M23, mais aussi du rideau qui est tombé à Dakar sur la 5e 5e édition de la table ronde sur la bonne gouvernance des ressources minières. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Thami.
Merci Joël, and that's how we as African Business come to the end of your business news for this week. Thank you to our producer Mabo Bulok, our technical operator Ndando Lutuli, and our social media expert Ntsako Mashaba. For news on the news desk, Onele Nzinzi, economics desk Chanduko Ligege, and from our sporting desk Musibudi Makura. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This has been Africa in Business on Channel Africa. You have yourself a splendid evening further as we now make way for the French desk that starts at 5 p.m. It's 1 minute to 5.
Un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue à l'écoute de Vue d'Afrique, votre magazine d'actualité africaine en langue française sur Channel Africa. Nous émettons depuis Johannesburg en Afrique du Sud et nous sommes ensemble pour 55 minutes de nouvelles sous la direction